do this. This is one of my first times moderating something, so let's see how this goes. Great. Well, thank you everybody for coming out. I think this summit's been really awesome to meet everyone, and see all the energy and all the ideas and everyone working on subnets. It's really cool stuff. As most panels do, we'll start off with a quick round of introductions. My name's Patrick. I'm the head of engineering at Ava Labs. I'll be here all week helping out with the hackathon, so if you're working on building anything, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have and try to help as much as I can. But yeah, now we'll go to the right. Simon.
Yeah, hi, my name is Simon. I'm from Vesterålen Havbruk, which is actually a fish producer in northern Norway. And yeah, we do like 10 to 15,000 tons of mostly wild-caught fish today. And we're now expanding our farming operations, where we'll be doing 100,000 tons by 2030, which will make it into the largest whitefish producer in the world. And I'm heading the development of the tech subsidiary, where we are building our own transparency solution on a subnet in order to track every fish that goes through our production, ideally one-to-one, so consumers can experience the whole journey and validate the whole journey themselves.
Hey guys, I'm Ganesh Swami from Covalent. We are a data provider for blockchains, including the Avalanche C chain. We index about 32 blockchains today, and we expose that data through a unified API. About 25,000 devs use the API every day, thousands of applications. Really excited to be here. Anything about data I'm passionate about. And yeah, thanks.
My name is Eugene from Chainstack. We are a node provider, so we provide the APIs for 10 plus blockchains, including Avalanche and many others, including Ethereum, Polygon, etc. So we build a foundational reliability layer for Web3. Basically, we provide access to the nodes with JSON RPC APIs, like GraphQL APIs, WebSocket APIs, you name it. And historically, we've been doing enterprise blockchains as well. And now it's super interesting to see how this evolves into subnets, which is sort of merged between public chains and permission chains. So really excited to see this technology merge and discuss this today.
Very cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. Great to have you here. I think the first thing to start off with is really just subnets. So, subnets mean something different to everybody. I think everyone wants to use them for something else. Really curious what about subnets got you interested to begin with. I think all of you guys have a different point you want to interact with in terms of subnets, and a different place in the opportunity space to fill. So yeah, maybe great to hear why subnets, what subnets. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can start on that. So I mean, we've been exploring a lot of solutions. But we have this mix of where we have we need an enterprise solution where we can kind of control the speed. We want to be building our own validators. We want to have the value chain as validators. We want to be able to control a lot of the mechanics. But at the same time, the real value we're creating here is with the end users and how they interact with the information they receive at the end of the supply chain. And so, we were looking at enterprise solutions from IBM. We were looking at more public blockchains as well. We were thinking about, should we be building our own blockchain to do this? And when we landed on Avalanche Subnet, it was it's not the same, so it's much easier than building your own blockchain, and a much better solution there. It has a lot of the customizability that you can get from an enterprise perspective. And lastly, it's kind of the ease of interaction with then public blockchains as well, that we are kind of thinking it's going to be good for scaling our products outside of just the enterprise products, but letting our end consumers interact with the product at some point in the future as well.
I'm a data guy, so let's talk about databases for a bit. You can never have one size fits all. So in the database world, there's hundreds of databases. There's key value stores, graph databases, relation databases, all kinds of databases. And blockchains are the same. So there's a whole spectrum of security commands. There's a whole spectrum of use cases. that you can never have one monolithic use case, one monolithic blockchain that supports all use cases. And so the natural evolution is to have full control over the stack. And some chains like Cosmos, where you bootstrap your own security model, that's one option. Subnets are pretty exciting, and it's a very rich design space. So I think as we can see from the traction, it's very natural to move onto a subnet, almost like use the C chain as a test bed. And once you have traction, you want more control. You want to control the gas, the experience for users. It makes sense to vertically integrate the stack, and subnets is a key component of that story.
Yeah, so I want to second everything that guy said, especially Patrick, when he mentioned that they started to build a solution. They tried to use other solutions like private blockchains as well as like IBM blockchain and any others. And as I mentioned, we've also started from providing the services like in early 2018. So we met a lot of challenges there because it's really hard to build on a private silo network because you need to agree. All the members need to be like accepted, and there's some sort of concept of like consortium, owner, person or company who actually administrates all the stuff happening on the network, which makes it really, really complicated to organize and to manage and to operate. And at the same time, around the same period, there was this promise of application-specific blockchains. And in particular, like guys like Polkadot and like Cosmos, they said, okay, guys, screw the main chain. You just need to use this kind of small chains that will execute your specific logic. And as we see today, this promise didn't really work out, as far as I know at least, and there is not like hundreds of application-specific blockchains. And that's what makes subnets exciting, because they are trying to deliver on this promise of application-specific blockchains, as well as this hybrid mode of operation for the blockchain, which could be permissionless, which could be permissioned, and you could configure that, and you could breach to the mainnet, et cetera, et cetera. So super excited about that, because actually like a couple of months ago, we were thinking about, okay guys, how do we recover this enterprise blockchain story and make it like useful, because people want privacy. They want like to have this like separated like domains where they want to operate their transactions in, but they still want to have access to the like liquidity. They want to have access to mainnets, et cetera, et cetera. And we were like, okay, let's build like a private blockchain, and then build bridge on the private blockchain, then build like between the private blockchain and public blockchain. And then like a few weeks after, we saw like subnets. Okay, that's pretty much what we wanted to do, and this is already being built, which is pretty cool, right?
Very cool. Yeah, I love your point about that. You get product market fit, you start to get traction on the C chain, you take advantage of all the shared infrastructure, and then once you have some sort of growth trajectory, you start to consider how to improve that experience for your customers. And that's one particular way that you could totally go about launching a subnet. We've seen a number of people investigate that option. I think Krabata is one of the big ones that I think they're the largest gas spender on the C chain that is now moving to their own subnet and very interested in that idea. But I don't think many people, I think they take for granted what sort of shared infrastructure that they do get on the primary network. We have these APIs, we have block explorers, stuff like that. And this talk is all about growing your subnet. So what are some of the things that, maybe, Simon, you're starting to think about as you launch your subnet, but then also, what are the operational concerns you need to think about, once you actually have the code out, now what? And so I'd love to hear from you guys, your perspective on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we have kind of a very different approach, because our first step is to build the transparency chain within our own vertical, within our own industry. So we own the fishing reception, the fillet factories, and we also the expanding farm operations, and we have co-owners that are our distribution partners. And so in our first stage, we're actually not like onboarding crypto users, but we are onboarding fishermen, we are onboarding factory workers, we are onboarding factory managers. And that's kind of also a key to why we are super eager to be using a subnet, is that to explain this, you just have to understand like a little bit a lot of people have tried to build transparency solutions on the blockchain before, but there are like we have identified two reasons that a lot of these projects have not worked out as they would like to. One of them is that it's not just about putting data on the blockchain, but you want to validate the truth of that data as well. So what we want to solve is not just like having a ledger that people can trust, but we kind of want to solve what the authorities can't. They can't control every fish or every pig or every that goes through the product line, but by using DeFi mechanics that a lot of people are used to, we can actually build like consensus mechanisms within it where you have fishermen's and fish receptions, factory works, every part of the value chain can actually validate each other to validate the truth of that data, and that way we can actually build mechanics where that would be similar to if we actually had one-to-one control with everything going on in the value chain. And then we want to bring on our businesses in our value chain as validators in our first steps. Yeah.
Very cool.
So, and then
eventually the fish will be validators too, eventually too, right?
Probably. At least they're going to be validated.
So we have a lot of experience with this particular question. And when you're launching a chain, an independent chain, you need a couple of components that's critical to the success of that network. First, you need some kind of bridge for assets to move in and move out. And the bridges, there's a whole spectrum, right? There's the trustworthy, trustless, fungible assets, non-fungible assets, synthetic assets, native assets, all kinds of, it's a huge design spectrum. Eric from my team has written an excellent post on the state of bridges. Then you need some kind of pricing mechanism. So usually that's an oracle. So before your lending markets go live on a chain, you need accurate prices from outside. And here, the choice for most projects is a project like Chainlink, but then you're relying on their engineering and their QA process to go live. So until you have an oracle, you can't really have any kind of lending market. So most of the DEXs, the stable coins, all of that is not going to be stable. The third thing is you need an indexer like Covalent. So here, the idea is that you have data on the blockchain, but you can't really use that data unless you have an indexing solution. So here, wallets, block explorers, NFT galleries, all kinds of things, right? Dashboards. So, the whole spectrum of use cases that Covalent supports, and we're the choice for lots of projects going to market. Then of course, you need stable coins. So stable coins, there's a whole spectrum here. You can have it pegged, you can have native assets, but trying to get something like USDC on your chain is months and months of work. So it's going to be quite difficult. So these are the core factors outside of the whole bootstrapping the security mechanism. I'm not even going to go there, but this is high level. You need a block explorer, you need an indexer, you need an oracle, you need a stable coin. And I think what will happen in a few years is that you just go to the Avalanche dashboard, you create a subnet, you pick your indexer, you pick your stablecoin, pick your oracle, and then boom, in 5 minutes, just like the cloud, you have your own subnet with everything in a box. I think we have a lot of work to get there, but that would be the promised land.
Thank you, Ganesh, for pitching our next product offering.
I was going to say, what are you guys going to have that website?
So that's exactly what we're building right now. So I want to add a little bit on the Indexer plus Explorer side. I think it's critically important because we do not have enough open source explorers and indexers, unfortunately. We've met some people on this conference that are building like cross-chain explorers. I think it's quite crazy idea because how do you build cross-chain explorers? But I think it's really good idea and it's good initiative to build more explorers because Etherscan is awesome. We all know that. It's very useful. It's very usable. It's amazing. It has amazing UI UX. But when we move on to like custom VMs, pretty much useless, right? So you need to do something new. And ideally, you do not want to build the new indexer and new explorer from scratch for each custom VM. So it's a really interesting problem to solve. I'm sure guys will support this initiative like 100% if someone wants to build like really like cross VM explorer. So that's critically important. So talking about the ease of creation and operating the subnets, I think many people are excited because it really takes one day to create a subnet which is basically like a bunch of like JSON files and like Genesis blocks, and then you deploy it on the chain. But then what happens next, right? So then you need this chain to be live, you need to update it, upgrade it, you need to fork it, you need to add new features to your VM, you need to agree with all the validators to upgrade the nodes, et cetera, et cetera. So from our like experience of running many nodes, like hundreds of nodes and networks over the last 3 years, generally speaking, operating blockchain network is an operational nightmare. So that's exactly why we exist. We try to solve this nightmare so people focus on important stuff like, okay, you just have an endpoint and you deploy stuff to your endpoint and it works, right? So for subnets, it will be more diverse because you're not just running one global network that everybody agrees on and that has one consensus like any other like chains that exist today pretty much, but you have this kind of multiverse of networks and each have their own rules, each have their own like potentially consensus which is internal to that network, and also like privacy, et cetera, et cetera. So this introduces a lot of complexities which enthusiastic people, they do not really comprehend at this point of time, but I'm sure like 1 year from now, when we have a lot of new subnets up and running, operational, that will be very interesting to see how it evolves and how infrastructure like players like us can help here to make this nightmare like less prevalent.
Yeah, and just like for us, like who are very focused on the product, just having this ecosystem around Avalanche as well is super important for us, right? Because a lot of our key stakeholders are not expert validators, so they're going to need help to do a lot of those things.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity to fill that space, and you know, as much as we want to provide tooling and help as much as possible, the whole hope here, right, is that there are so many creators and so many validators that there's no way that we or anyone else could single-handedly help everybody. So hopefully we see. I think the subnet in a box thing you guys have both talked about is very much been one thing I've heard about people wanting, and I think especially for traditionally companies that are coming into the space for the first time may not know much about blockchains, and they've been evaluating these private solutions for a long time, and they don't really know where to go from. So it's great to have different people that can walk them through. In the same way, I think many developers, when they get started, they're really excited, and Subnet's the silver bullet that seemingly solves all problems, right? But everyone knows that everything has trade-offs. I'm really curious, in your exploration of subnets and your understanding of subnets, what were some, I'm assuming you at some point ran into some blocker or some like, oh, gotcha, as you started to learn about subnets. And I think one big thing we're working on doing here especially is helping to teach developers things that they should think about when they're creating a subnet, things that they should be aware of, like, oh, I have to run the node this way to make sure that subnets work. Were there any gotchas you guys ran into, or things that you, were like, oh, that would have been great to know ahead of time that could help new developers starting off with subnets? Yeah.
This is a great question. So we spent months answering exactly that question. So when we were trying to find a settlement chain for the covalent decentralized network, our choices, this was a year and a half back, were Cosmos Zone or settling it onto an existing chain. And the gotchas with the Cosmos Zone is, I think, the exact same thing we're going to have with the subnets. So all the things with the nodes and the oracles and all of that, you have to bootstrap them from scratch. In Cosmos, in addition, you have to bootstrap the validator set, which is also pretty hard. But the showstoppers for us were exchange listings, and custody. So now you have to go through all of the other infrastructure partners and get on their list for integration. And exchanges and custodians require months of work to run their own nodes, as opposed to just a regular ERC20 token. A regular ERC20 token that lives on any of the, including the C chain, is natively supported by any of the big exchanges. So there's not a lot of work there. The second thing is with security audits. You see this in the Solana world. So a Rust-based program that you would write in Solana, however simple the task is, getting an auditor firm to do your audits is super, super hard. Unlike something that's written on the EVM with Solidity, where there are multiple vendors who offer auditing services. So these are factors that you need to enlist before you go to market, because you need to pad your time to market, because just writing the code is not enough. You have to have the audits, you have to have the liquidity, you have to have all of these other features. So those are the two gotchas that prevented us, Covalent, from building our own zone. Even though it's pretty exciting to run your own chain, we decided to just have an ERC20 asset on a regular EVM chain.
Yeah, just want to add a little challenge that we have and that we explore. So basically, when you're building like a subnet on testnet, you do not care too much about like monetary incentives that you should have and that you should be involving into the operational side. But when you're like dealing with subnets on mainnet, you need to be aware that you need to have actual real AVAX validator to validate the subnet. And then you either need to be one, you either need to find other validators who would validate your subnet, or you need to find like an infrastructure provider potentially who would provide you these validators for your subnet. So this is an interesting problem to crack, because there are clear benefits of having validators validating main like C-chain and subnet as well, but at the same time, it's really a hard problem monetarily, because not all the people who want to create subnets, they have monetary incentive or just like possibility or opportunity to have validators on the mainnet. So it's an interesting problem to solve, and we are also approaching it differently. Like we're thinking, okay, we as an infrastructure company, should we provide like validators that other people could use for free, or for some like low cost, or for some reasonable cost, maybe pay per use, something like that, so that they can be validators on their subnets, etc. So we are thinking about different models, which could be interesting for like smaller networks, larger networks, and in between, right?
Yeah, I think the question I have from here is, you know, based on these things and things you run into, you mentioned a great point about partner integration and auditing as a big part of, you know, deploying your own chain and how you build on top of that. Many people, we know with the virtual machine interface, it's very generic, right? So we have Subnet EVM, which allows anyone to write their own EVM, but we also allow people to write their own custom virtual machines. You know, you guys have all dug into this and dug into a number of different solutions. You know, I'd love to hear a prediction from you guys on, you know, based on everything you know, how do you think the VM, you know, development process will go out? Do you think people will, you know, just stick with the EVM and, you know, keep it that way and really change nothing besides the fees? Or do you think people are just going to like start over from scratch and like build crazy different things on it? And, you know, if you think it'll change over time, you know, feel free to elaborate on that. I think there's a lot of different approaches here. Yeah.
So I've given this question a lot of thought, and I think in the EVM space, there are basically two kinds of projects. There are Me Too projects and projects that are completely novel. And I think one of the most attractive things about Solana is that they had to go through the grind of bootstrapping a brand new ecosystem. So it's not, you don't see a lot of Me Too projects on Solana that's just taking an EVM contract and cloning it and putting it on Solana. So I think that's a net positive for that ecosystem. On the EVM chains, I think what will happen is if you're a single purpose application, then it just makes sense to go with the EVM. But if you're trying to build something that is extensible, something that's modular, then it makes sense to go back and rethink the architecture and introduce custom elements, right? Maybe a different programming language, maybe a different programming model, a different security model. But I think these choices have to be deliberate. On the application layer, I think I would say a majority of the stack would be EVM based. That is just my thesis. And you're seeing that play out in other ecosystems. So there's Aurora Labs, which is a sidechain, EVM sidechain for Near. There's Neon Labs, which is a sidechain for Solana that's EVM based. And I think it's just natural. You know, we partner with all of those projects, and but their go-to-markets, they're all completely different. But EVM as a foundation, even though it's not the best, seems to have won this cycle of the run.
So yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and there are kind of two answers. So one is like how I would like to see it and how I would think it would be happening. So one is, of course, the application-specific chain idea is great, but it's notoriously complex to build a new VM. So I've been dealing with VMs for like 15 years probably, and I started not with blockchain VMs, but the ones that were created to to have protection from disassembly and all this kind of reverse engineering stuff, like in binaries. And these VMs were notoriously complex to develop, right? So the same happens here with VMs on the blockchain, right? So it's just complicated to build a new VM, and you need like a company like, I don't know, Avalanche or like or Solana with like a lot of good engineering talent to build a new VM, right? So I think in the long term, what would happen, we would actually, how I would like to see it is that we have some custom VMs that are purpose-built. And today there was a great talk by the Pangolin CEO, and he mentioned, okay, let's bring Unity as a VM. Let's bring Unreal Engine as a VM, and it's a pretty sick idea, right? So why don't we bring these engines as virtual machines on the network, and then we can actually have natively engine games on the blockchain, which is pretty cool, right? But it would probably take a lot of time, and that's how I would like to see it. How I think it would happen, we'll see a lot of EVM, of course, right? And all the EVM options. And I think that what would be good in the near term are some versions of like EVM with not full functionality. So maybe some cutted versions of EVM that do not bring all this complexity and all these fees, but maybe limited functionality EVMs, something around these lines that are simpler than EVM. They do not have maybe Turing completeness or whatnot, but they are cheaper, they are more efficient, they are more high performance, but they're still sort of EVM option, right?
Yeah, I'm very curious, Simon, what you guys have decided to do, or if you're still deciding.
Yeah, so I mean, our priority is not to build our own VM, but for us, so just to go a little bit back to the business logic, basically. So when we're building the most transparent phishing operation that's out there, we're already being transparent. Now we're going to prove it with a product that people can scan and experience in the store. But then that's not just to add value to our product. So what we want to do, we want to set a new standard for transparency. And that brings me to like the second point that has crushed a lot of transparency solutions before. It's that okay, you can set a new standard, but if all your competitors or other businesses have to give you their data in order to take part in it, that's not going to happen. So what we can do here is that we can actually, the beauty for us is that how simple it is to develop on an EVM, and then we can make a lot of the infrastructure and we available and open source that, and then we can tweak the subnet if we permission it or make it permissionless, right? But if we permission it so that we make sure that it's not overloaded and overcomes some of the shortcomings of the EVM, but still works for everyone in the chain. So and then it makes it easy for our competitors or even other industries in the food industry who are not doing fish to actually just use everything we built and to follow the standard that we're trying to set.
So there's actually an opportunity for projects like Simon, and including all the gaming startups. So what we are starting to see is projects that are migrating to their own sidechain are starting to come up with data standards. So let's say you have a single DEX and you have a single, any other infrastructure piece. And if you have data standards on how to read the data, now you set the standard for all sidechains or chains that are settling on your chain. So for example, if it's not just fisheries, but other kinds of supply chains, if you come up with the standards there, now that becomes how people talk to each other, right? And then your reference implementation just takes the industry forward by leaps and bounds. So it's a huge opportunity if we do it right, I think.
Yeah. Very, very good conversation. I wish we weren't running out of time here, but I do want to give you guys a chance to wrap up with any closing thoughts, any things you want to add. I think many of you guys are newer companies, growing companies in the space, and I'm sure you have different announcements or different things you want to talk about, that initiatives or ways you want to help developers. I mean, I think this talk is really geared to people creating their subnet for the first time. So if you want to make an appeal to them, I think this is a good chance for that. So,
go.
Yeah, so me and Ganesh, we actually have a small announcement. So today we want to launch the joint offering between ChainStack and Covalent to basically build what Ganesh pitched like 15 minutes ago. Basically an easy way to spin up your your subnet, operate it on a managed platform like ChainStack, and also get data from it using the indexers and APIs that Covalent provide. So we launched this offering today. We really, really want to get your feedback. We really want to have projects on board. So we're now talking to the top guys who want to run subnets. And we already have a lot of interest because they say, okay, we run like 10 validators today, but we don't really want to run them. We really want to implement our business logic, our app, our game, whatever, and we do not really want to like run this like 32 CPU, like 100 gig of RAM machines and like make sure that they're running correctly and everything works well. So we want to work with you guys because it's still early for us. It's not something that we've built for like years, so it's still very new technology. We want to get your feedback, iterate, and make something that is useful and then everybody can use in the future to build their own subnets ecosystems.
So what Eugene said, ChainStack, Covalent, having the subnet in a box, pretty exciting. But I actually have another, not really an announcement, really it's a congrats to the community. Our data guy, Brandon, did some crunching this morning, and there's 2 million wallets that have spent gas on the C chain. And that number was crossed yesterday. So kudos to the community. I think 2 million is a fantastic milestone. And we hope to share more insights, more charts like that. So if you go to my Twitter profile, it's pinned, because I think it's pretty big milestone. So congrats to this community.
One more community announcement that we have. We launched subnet.tech today, which is pretty much a fork of chainlist.org, but for subnets. So if you want to discover new subnets, like see what's going on, or contribute your own subnet, feel free to do it. Antonio is a lead developer for this thing, so please reach out to him. And if you have a subnet up and running, or if you have one which is up in like 1 month or something, please reach out to him. And it's in GitHub also. You can create a PR. So I think it's good to discover subnets easily, right? Because you can also like connect to it in one click and so on and so forth.
Very cool.